Major funding for these broadcasts is made possible by grants from New York Community Bank, Capital One Bank, M&T Bank, Customers Bank, Chase Commercial Term Lending, Perfect Building Maintenance, Genova Burns, Terra CRG. Additional support is made possible by AKA Hotels Corman Communities, Aerial Property Advisors, AVR Realty Company, Bank of America Merrill Lynch, Bank Leumi USA, Briarwood Organization, CBRE, Citizens Bank, Collins Building Services, Colliers International NYC, Connect One Bank, CPEX Real Estate Services, Cushman & Wakefield, DDG, Dime Savings Bank of Williamsburg, Douglaston Development, Levine Builders, Eastern Union Funding, Fisher Brothers, First Nationwide Title Agency, Flushing Bank, Friedman, Handler Real Estate Organization, HAP Investments, Hersha Hospitality, Investors Bank, James D. Kuhn Real Estate Center at Syracuse University, Kilroy Architectural Windows, Madison Realty Capital, Matone Group, Mercantile Commerce Bank, Meridian Capital Group, New Banks, Newmark Grubb Knight Frank, Optimum Window Manufacturing Corp., People's United Bank, Rosewood Realty Group, SJP Properties, Sterling National Bank, Stonehenge Partners, TD Bank, The Continuum Company, the Moynihan Group, and these friends.
Bronx, New York, Newark, New Jersey, football, baseball, looking around, having a great time in high school. I'm going to try to find a college. I'll go between different colleges. Marines. Maybe I'll get involved with, prosecution. Maybe one day I'll become a lawyer. I'm going to become a detective in Essex County. You know what? I'm going to become more than a detective. I'm going to go to law school, and I'm going to become a prosecutor. And I'm going to prosecute cases, this major drug case of a guy by the name of Frank Lucas. Frank Lucas, American Gangster. So I have today a criminal defense attorney and a good human being, Richie Roberts. Thanks for being here today.
Thank you very much.
So Richie, tell me, growing up, you were born in the Bronx, but you had as one would say, a little dysfunctional 8-year period?
A little bit. I was actually raised by my grandparents, my mother's parents in the Bronx.
Now, what did Grandpa do? You said to me
he worked for Alexander's.
Right, but he worked for Alexander's, you think, in Queens?
No, my recollection is it's in Brooklyn. I know he had to get on the subway every morning, and I'm pretty sure it was Brooklyn.
So your grandparents raised you for the first 8 years, you said.
Yes.
And you periodically would see your mother. And then what happens? Your father one day gets a job for an insurance company in Newark, New Jersey?
He became a claims manager for an insurance company. I really, it's a long time ago. I don't have a exact recollection, but I do remember my mother coming on occasion to see me. I don't remember my dad, but whatever happened, they got together when I was about 8, if they were separated.
Your youth was really a great time. You had a lot of fun. You had a lot of characters, the Redskins and so on, and we have some pictures. Tell me about growing up.
Growing up in Newark was great. I was with an unusual bunch of guys. Weequahic High School was fantastically academically. It was one of the 2 or 3 top public schools in the country during that period of time. And most of our class, all the classes, were people who were dedicated to studies, mostly Jewish. The younger classes became more diverse, African Americans, Italians. And study was their main focus. Our main focus was having a good time. Most of the guys in our club, the Redskins, were football players. I don't know how any of us got through school seriously, because we didn't take it very serious. We played poker over the weekends. We got in fights. We tried to go out with as many women as we could. We didn't adhere to the straight and narrow as we should have.
What do you do during the summers?
I worked usually at the swim club. The swim club actually was owned by a girlfriend of mine, so it was easy to get a job. And I was a lifeguard there. I parked cars there. I think just about every summer I did that.
But you said to me, you had a great time. You were co-captain of the football team.
Right.
We have a picture of the Redskins. You were shy in class, but you were not shy personally to the group.
That's right. That's right. I was worse than shy. In 4 years at Weequahic, if I raised my hand 4 times, that was a lot. I was very, very embarrassed to speak in class. I'm not sure why, but that's the way I behaved.
Now, what happened with the protection or something when you were going to high school with Joey? And
Actually, it was in grammar school. When I moved from the Bronx to Newark, there was a candy store on the corner right next to Peshine Avenue School. And one of my first days there, I went there to buy some baseball bubble gum, which was obviously very popular. And I felt something sharp in my back. I turned around, and there was this guy who I later learned was Joey Sedano. And
Joey Sedano was a member of the mob?
Joey Sedano was a member of the Bruno family from Philly in the mob.
And this is when Joey's 11 years of age or something?
I was probably less, probably 8, 9. He was older. And he told me I had to pay protection. If I'm going to Peshine Avenue School, I have to pay him, and he had a couple of guys with him protection. So I later became friends with him, so I wouldn't have to pay the money. But he started out very early on the wrong side of the law.
Now, when you were going to school, do you have any idea what you wanted to do later on, or just have a lot of fun?
Just have a lot of fun, really.
So you graduated high school, what, 1956?
1956. We had split seasons, January, 2 classes each year.
And what happens then?
Well, for half a year, I worked, and I went to Bradley University for 6 months.
So how did you decide on Bradley University in Ohio? Not that many people knew about Bradley University in Ohio.
It's Illinois, actually.
Illinois.
Yeah, Peoria, Illinois, where there's nothing to do at any time, day or night. We had a guidance counselor, a wonderful guy, Mr. LaPena, and he told some of the members of the Redskins that the only place you're going to get into is this Bradley University in Peoria, Illinois. Great basketball team, you'll have a lot of fun, go there. And I came back, went into the Marines, which was a great experience, especially boot camp. Paris Island was a wonderful place not to go to. And then I came back, and I was, I had no money. I didn't know what I was going to do. They're still in my parents' house. And Joey Sedano asked me if I wanted to be to work for him, to be part of his crew. Joey ran numbers. He also was muscle. And he rode around in a nice Cadillac, the typical, stereotypical thing you hear about mobsters. And I thank God, I said, no, I'll do something. And I enrolled in Uppsala College in East Orange. Fortunately, I got a scholarship because of football. I had blown my knee out in high school, and I was not terrific in college. I was really running on one leg.
And what happens later on? You continued not wanting to speak.
Yeah, but what happened in Uppsala was if I knew I had to speak in class, I would not show up. I just couldn't do it. I literally could not get myself to go. I wanted to, but I couldn't physically go. There was a process of dropping classes that I didn't adhere to. And when I was supposed to graduate, and I never spoke in class. Matter of fact, a couple of times when I had to take a course, I spoke to the professor, please give me a break. I'll do everything I have to do, but don't call on me. And they were kind enough not to. But when I was supposed to graduate, I was called in by the dean and said, you can't graduate because you have X amount of academic Fs. What's an academic F? You didn't go to class, you didn't drop the classes. No, but I did everything else. No, you can't graduate. And I couldn't. Threw me out. But fortunately, I was able at that time to get a job in the Essex County Prosecutor's office.
So how'd you get the job in the prosecutor's office? I mean, because you're not an attorney at this time.
Right.
You're really not a college graduate at this time.
Right. My dad worked, the insurance company he worked for was run by the Essex County chairman, a guy named Harry Lerner. I don't know the truth of how my dad and Mr. Lerner got together on this, but my father must have asked him, can you get something for Richard?
So you work in the Essex County prosecutor's office as what?
A detective.
So you're carrying arms, right?
Sure.
As a detective. And what happens during that period of time when you're there?
Well, I worked organized crime.
Undercover?
Undercover. In those days, the big thing in organized crime was gambling. The gambling money was coming in like crazy. It was immense. And organized crime controlled Newark, absolutely controlled it. And I knew a lot of these guys from growing up. I knew the Jewish wise guys, and I knew some of the Italian wise guys, and they put me in that squad right away to get intelligence and work cases. And I did that for a couple of years. I was a detective for about 9 years. We had to blow my cover because we learned of a homicide that was going to take place. And the only way that we could stop it was if I became visible and testified.
So that's when you decide to go to law school?
No, not yet. When I started to testify, it took superhuman effort to get to the courthouse, to get on the stand the first couple of times. I was scared to death. But I did it, and there were a lot of cases made, and a lot of times I testified, and I saw the lawyers who were representing the wise guys and the prosecutors. I said, I could do that. That's not rocket science.
Yeah, but then you couldn't make the decision. I represent the prosecutor or I represent the wise guys. Since you had history on both sides, you had the opportunity to look.
I did, but
You took the other side.
I took the law side.
So you applied to Seton Hall Law School.
Yeah, I applied to Seton Hall Law School. I was accepted at Seton Hall Law School, evening school, because I maintained my employment as a detective.
But no longer as an undercover detective.
No longer undercover. No longer. We did a lot of surveillances, undercover surveillances, but no, they all knew me. I knew them. I don't know. I just liked what I was doing, and I decided to become a prosecutor. I took a $3,000. Remember, I took a $3,000 cut in salary. My salary as a detective was, I think it was around 17. It was a long time ago. And I took a $3,000 cut to become a prosecutor.
But now the school problem hits you again, right?
When I was supposed to graduate, it was really deja vu. I got called into the dean's office, who I knew. He said, Rich, you can't graduate, and you can't take the bar. I said, what are you talking about? I'm ready. I'm all set to go. You didn't graduate from undergrad school. I said, I know that. You know that. You knew that when I came here. What? Why can't I do it? Well, times have changed. I'm sorry, but you can't take the bar, and you can't graduate. So the prosecutor's job was part-time at that time, and a couple of prosecutors agreed to help me, and we petitioned the Supreme Court to allow me to at least take the bar. Because if too much time is going to go by,
You would have forgot, right?
Yeah. And the Supreme Court came down with a decision in time for me to take the bar, saying that in Solomon-like wisdom, you can take it, but we're not telling you if you passed or failed until you finish undergrad school.
So you had to go back to...
I went back. I went to Rutgers Evening School, Rutgers Newark, and again, 5 nights a week. 5 nights a week for another year. And I took all the courses I needed to graduate, which was much harder than law school because I've been out of it so long. French, advanced math, which I am terrible at, but I got by.
So you finally, and then you found out that you had passed the bar over there. So now
Yes.
you're in the prosecutor. No longer as the detective, you're a prosecutor.
Right.
So tell me about what happens in the prosecutor office before our interesting case.
Okay. I started out in the courts and tried all kinds of cases, homicide cases, everything you can think of in Newark. Everything you can think of goes wrong in Newark on the streets. And because of my background as a detective, they decided to appoint me to actually a federally funded task force called the Bureau of Narcotics. It had a 3-man board of directors, the sheriff of the county, the prosecutor of the county, and myself. We all were actually responsible to the U.S. attorney for money problems, and we were paid by the government, federal government. And our job was to locate and to arrest major players, not street guys, but major drug dealers, time-consuming and great.
So there was this major drug guy who was originally from Newark, right? But he was a major drug guy in Harlem, right?
Well, Frank was originally from North Carolina. His whole family was.
His name is Frank Lucas.
Frank Lucas.
Subsequently, Russell Crowe plays your life in American Gangster.
Right. And Denzel Washington played Frank. One of his brothers, a guy named Shorty, Vernon Lee, but everybody called him Shorty for obvious reasons. He was short. Probably as brutal or more brutal than Frank was. He was a stone killer. He ran New Jersey for Frank. Frank headquarters was in Harlem. He had other brothers in the other boroughs in the city. Shorty ran Newark, and we noticed that the old-time drug dealers, street guys, were disappearing. And new guys were coming in, most of them, if not all of them, with Southern accents. It was Frank's nephews and nieces and cousins. He replaced the old guys with the new guys. The problem was that the drugs that they were bringing in, the quality was much higher than the old drugs that were being sold. And consequently, a lot of addicts were dying. They were ODing on the high-quality drugs. And this was going on up and down the coast. That was the reason that the BON, Bureau of Narcotics, was created, not only in Newark, but they had offices in Washington and Boston and in New York, of course. Find out where this stuff is coming from and who's distributing it and stop it. That was our mandate. But it wasn't just Frank. There were major coke dealers and other things going on. We had jurisdiction over all of them. But he was the main focus. And 3 Newark detectives who were investigating the country boys, as they were called in Jersey, came aboard the Bureau of Narcotics, and we worked on trying to get Frank Lucas and the country boys.
How many years did the case take?
Well,
I mean, Frank used to smuggle off in Vietnam, or?
From the Golden Triangle, Cambodia, Thailand. Sure. He had a partner named Ike Atkinson. Atkinson was the guy, he was a former sergeant in the U.S. Army. He bought a gin mill, I think it was in Bangkok, if I'm not mistaken, and made the connection, and Frank controlled everything that came into these states.
So how did you finally catch Frank Lucas?
We couldn't catch him. we kept on extending the investigation. We could have brought it down earlier, but we were looking to get Frank, and we couldn't. We learned of a major shipment coming up from North Carolina. It was a lot of dope, and I just felt we couldn't do it. We couldn't let that hit the streets. The U.S. Attorney was starting to get on my case. Come on, let's wrap this up. And we decided to take it down when the shipment came up. So we set up the job. We were lucky enough to get that shipment. It was in the projects in Newark where they were going to cut it, and locked up not everybody, but Shorty, his wife who was involved, some major players in the Jersey mob connection with Frank, but we couldn't get Frank. I thought it was over. Because these guys would not flip. I mean, you could talk to them till you're blue in the face, threaten them with life imprisonment. They weren't flipping on Frank. One of his cousins finally did flip. And he gave us everybody in the operation that he knew of, and he gave us Frank. It was very weak. He had seen Frank, he had gone to Frank's parents' house in Bergen County and had watched Frank give orders to his brothers of how to handle business. That's all he knew. There was also a raid on that same house some years earlier by the feds where Frank threw out about $500,000 or more out a window, which was recovered, and I could use that in the trial. As a matter of fact, I was called down to the prosecutor's office, a wonderful guy named Joe Lordi, who was like my second father. And he and the first assistant, Anthony Mortone, went over the case with me. And they said, Joe said, Rich, you got a great chance of losing Frank Lucas. You can win the rest, but you can lose Frank Lucas. If you do that, you'll always be known as the guy who lost the Frank Lucas case. Your decision, it's your case. A lot of prosecutors wouldn't have said that. Most wouldn't. It's your case. What do you want to do? Whatever you do, I'll be behind you. And I wanted the case. And I said, let's go for it. He said, okay.
So you won the case over there, but what happens later on that he turned state's evidence?
During the trial, it was almost as if he had an epiphany. We had somebody on the stand who told of the horrors of losing her daughter to blue magic, which is what his dope was called. And people were literally crying in the courthouse, in the courtroom. It was very rough to hear. When it was over, Frank's lawyer, very fine lawyer, Larry Dubin from New York, said that Frank wanted to speak to me. I said, about what? He said, I don't know. He doesn't want me there. I said, you sure? He said, yeah. I thought he was going to plead or something, or flip right then. We sat in a very small cell, holding cell up by the courthouse, and he said to me words to the effect, I never thought of it that way. That's as best as I can recall. And I said, okay, you know what you've done. Are you ready to plead and work with us? He said, let's see what happens with the trial. Which was weird, strange, but it was an emotional moment for everybody. So after the trial, I got a call from him. Couldn't have been more than a week later. He wants to talk to me. So I spoke to him. He said he wanted to cooperate. He wanted to get dirty cops off the streets. He knows I don't like dirty cops. I said to him, not just dirty cops, Frank. You want to cooperate, you got to give up every person you ever sold a dime bag to. I don't care if it's your family, everybody. I don't care if they're wise guys, you got to give it all up. And he did. Gave up everything.
So he then, as you said to me when we got together, spent about 8 years in prison.
About 8 years.
Then witness protection.
Yes.
And then you get a phone call one day, right?
Yes. I got a call. He said he wanted to sit down. Well, you know, we became friendly. When somebody flips, you work with them closely, and you develop a relationship. So we had that relationship. I want to talk to you. What about, Frank? He says, well, let's meet, have breakfast, or we'll talk. I said, I don't want to talk to you, Frank. You're going to get shot and you need to get me shot. He said, no, I made peace with everybody, whatever that meant. So we met, and he told me that Nick Pileggi wanted to make a movie about him. Would I represent him in the movie? I said, sure. I said, you got any money? He said, no, you took it all. I said, well, why should I do it? He said, you know, something good may come out of it. And I was interested in it anyway. So Nick and I and Frank went to different producers to try to sell the Frank Lucas story. And they all said no because they had just done a movie about a black gangster, Bumpy Johnson, who was the #1 guy in Harlem. So Nick calls me one day and says, Rich, we're changing it around. Would you mind being in the movie? I said, you mean myself or a character? No, let your character be in the movie. I said, what do I care about it? I didn't know really about the money situation, but I figured something of good would come of it, and it's fun. So I said, sure. And then they changed it around, and Steve Zalian was the writer. Great guy, great writer, Schindler's List.
Right, and then finally in 2006, it was produced, right?
Yes, 2000, yeah.
2005, 2006. You then became godfather to Frank's son.
I was, yes, I became godfather before that. He was somebody worth salvaging. Frank has 19 kids.
Right, and Frank today is in assisted living somewhere in Newark, you
Yes.
said. You then, after that, you became you left the prosecution office and became a defense attorney, correct?
That's correct.
And you're still practicing defense?
I'm still practicing criminal defense, yes.
So, you know, for the kid who had 8 strange years in the Bronx, okay, who played some football, who had a little stuttering or a little problem, you came out of it, and you became really a person who helped the community by getting rid of, you know, the Frank Lucas gang and everything else, and helped the prosecution. And I'd like to say thank you for being here today.
You're very welcome.